This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with my weekly review of the points I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. There's a lot more in there that I don't find interesting. So if you want to know the whole scoop, get the newsletter. Let's start off with AEW news because this Observer actually came out last week, but I just couldn't review it until now. So the Survivor Series edition will be this week. Last week's edition was all about Full Gear. Not all about, but the main topic of interest was Full Gear, the AEW show, November 18th at the Forum in Los Angeles, which had 13,000 in attendance. And Tony Khan claims 100,000 pay-per-view buys. Of course, the actual paid gate was 12,000 paid at a $900,000 gate. They announced it was a sellout, but the actual capacity of that building is 17,505. So they just called it a sellout. And it recently came out too. And I mean, they still got a great number for all in, but they had announced over 80,000 in the building, but there was just over 72,000 that went through the turnstiles that day. So as far as the event itself, a lot of people didn't like this. They started off by claiming, I mean, it was MJF in the main event against Jay White, and they started off by saying MJF was injured. He would not be wrestling Jay White in the main event. And instead it would be Adam Cole, who has a real serious injury and is still on crutches. So it really didn't make any sense. And they left the main event in question for the whole show. And then MJF, who was supposed to be injured, ended up going like 30 minutes with Jay White. So for a guy that was injured, that's a hell of a long time to wrestle injured. The big match that everyone, well, all the internet fans seemed to like was Swerve Strickland versus Adam Page, which was a real gruesome, hardcore match with staple guns and stuff. And I have to agree with Meltzer here, although, I mean, I don't like staple guns. I've never seen like a real life fight where a staple gun has been used. So while it actually hurts and causes real damage, I don't find staple guns to be realistic. I'm not a fan of like. I agree with like wrestling if hardcore wrestling if it's like realistic, but when they bring in, and I didn't see this match, but like, you know, for example, the panes of glass and stuff, which I think is really dangerous. And I mean, if you're in a bar fight, you could go through a pane of glass, yes, but in a wrestling ring, you shouldn't really have that around. But anyways, Meltzer brings up in this Wrestling Observer that I'm reviewing right now that for a company that caters to families and has TV network deals, he was surprised they did such a gruesome and bloody match. And I would say if I had kids, which I do not have kids, I wouldn't want my kids to watch like a match with people being stapled and stuff. I just wouldn't. I think that's like, there's one thing I wouldn't take my kids. Honestly, I know a lot of people do it, but maybe I'm just different. I wouldn't even take my kids to UFC until they were in their teenagers. I know people do bring little kids to UFC and stuff, but I mean, I know that this sounds strange coming from me, but I wouldn't necessarily take my kids to see something so violent at a young age, because that can cause mental issues. Those are the main points from the pay-per-view, other than they had a big announcement that they signed Will Ospreay that nobody outside of the smart marks would care about. I mean, it's funny because at the Survivor Series, we all know now, WWE debuted CM Punk to massive fanfare and made huge news. It's the talk of the wrestling world. I mean, the whole Will Ospreay talk wasn't much. It was kind of a blip. And although he's a good wrestler, good wrestlers aren't necessarily good wrestlers if you like leg slapping and flips. Let me be straight on that. As far as amateur wrestling credentials, I don't know if this guy has any amateur wrestling credentials or real fighting credentials, but he's good at the modern pro wrestling style. So good for him. He got a massive contract. He can stay in England. He's going to fly back and forth and stuff. But as far as is he going to be the next Rock, John Cena, Chris Jericho? I mean, I just don't think he appeals to casual fans. The big free agent on the market now, other than Goldberg, who if they had announced they signed Goldberg, it would have been everywhere. Even if they had announced they signed Ronda Rousey, it would be everywhere. But instead, Ronda Rousey, who didn't sign, she made an unannounced debut on Ring of Honor. So they didn't even try to get a rating from putting her on one of their television shows or try to boost the attendance in the building, which was just over 4,000 that day, by announcing Ronda Rousey was going to be on the show. Instead, they put her in an unadvertised match on Ring of Honor, which only airs on the subscription network. So I'm sure they will get a couple more subscriptions out of that, but since their ratings haven't been doing anything impressive lately, a couple of the things I don't understand about Tony Khan's booking is stuff like this, like Ronda Rousey. This was exciting news that she debuted when she said she'd retired and stuff, and appeared in on a big AEW show, even if it was a one-off. Although I'm sure over time, if she's broken her retirement promise 2 or 3 times already, because she's done several independent matches, I'm sure she's going to break it more. But like, why not promote it and sell some more tickets and get some more interest in the product and make it a surprise? Just like when Ric Flair debuted, that was a surprise, and the show did a horrible rating, and he hasn't been advertised on a TV show since. I just don't get it. But he's the son of a billionaire, and they probably don't care about getting out of the red as much as a normal person would. All the most recent WWE cuts are going to be free agents on December 21st. And apparently the key names that AEW might be interested in are Dolph Ziggler, Mustafa Ali, Matt Riddle, Shelton Benjamin, Elias, Emma, Aliyah, Top Dollar, who the only thing he did of noteworthy in his last run was miss that horrible dive where everyone still bumped without being touched. Dana Brooke, Boggs, Riddick Moss, Mace, Mansoor, Shanky, and Daba Kato. Meltzer brings up that AEW doesn't need any of these guys, how overblown their roster is. I'd be honest, I know he doesn't like to release people. He just likes to not use them and let them ride out their contracts. I would release a bunch of the no names, and I would hire Riddle, Benjamin, and Ziggler. They are the 3 names that stand out to me of that group. Emma is good looking, but they have so many women already on their roster right now, and I don't know how over their women's division is. Like, for instance, Paige, who's known as Saraya now, after her debut and like her first match, she kind of faded off the radar. You hardly hear anything about her anymore. As far as the Dynamite tapings in Chicago, this past or two Wednesdays ago, November 22nd, which is my brother's birthday, for some trivia. The show drew just over 5,000 fans at the Wintrust Arena in Chicago. Apparently, they had heavily discounted tickets due to a week advance. In other wrestling news, former WCW star who has also wrestled for WWE, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, aka Buff Bagwell, who's 53 now, was arrested on November 16th. He was arrested for speeding and a DUI due to drugs in Cobb County, Georgia. He's lucky the big boss man is dead because he was put in jail at 1:39 p.m. and released the next day at 1:51 p.m. So he spent just over 24 hours in jail. Marcus Bagwell just can't keep himself out of trouble and has every excuse in the world for his continuous screw-ups. And I mean, the guy's admitted to being on crystal meth in the past. He's admitted to cocaine use, multitude of prescription pills. He's admitted to drinking 25 plus beers a day for years on end. He's got all kinds of accusations out there. Wish him the best. Apparently, Vice and The Rock's $7 entertainment company are putting out a multi-part series about the demise of WCW. The NWA, their big TV deal, appears to be NWA Power on the CW app. Now, Billy Corgan had claimed that they had a television deal with a top 20 station for both NWA Power as well as his reality show. And Meltzer notes that the CW is actually a top 30 station, and they appear to be only on the app. So who knows if Billy Corgan's, if there's another station that we just don't know about, or what. Some people are claiming that they were going to be on the TV station itself, but due to the recent cocaine angle that they did with James Mitchell, the CW didn't want them on TV. I don't know about that. We know that the WWE is dealing with an antitrust lawsuit now, and NXT has signed a big deal with the CW to begin in October 2024. This NXT deal, or sorry, this NWA Power deal, from what I understand, it started off, who knows if it'll be more than 8 episodes, but at this point, it's only 8 episodes. And I've watched a lot of, not a lot, but I've maybe watched 20 NWA Power videos. Not all in full. I have to admit, I tapped out on a lot of them. But over the past month. And I have to say, I don't like that you never see the crowd. They shoot it against a curtain, and it sounds like there's next to nobody in the audience. That's one of my pet peeves about it. It doesn't look like professional wrestling. It looks like they're filming a play. And it's like they have microphones under the ring, and you guys can comment on this if you agree. Since the crowd is so small and they have microphones under the ring, which a lot of companies do, it's an old trick that was revealed on the Secret Pro Wrestling Secrets revealed back in the 90s. But either that or they just have a really loud ring. But to me, the sound of them walking and running the ropes is so loud that it's distracting. And I've said this before, they've got a lot of out of shape wrestlers that are in skimpy outfits. Like a lot of fat guys in short shorts, for instance, which I don't know. I just don't necessarily want to see that. Otis carries it well. Otis wears it well. But some of these guys in the NWA that are heavy set with these tights that are crawling up their ass, it's just not something I want to watch. It's a very like 1970s-ish look, which I guess he might be going for. But it's funny that they always present themselves kind of as old school. NWA is supposed to be old school. And I like Billy Corgan. I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying personally what I didn't like about watching the product. They're doing a match, and at one point in one of these matches I was watching, Zack Ryder's music hits, and they just stop in the middle of the match while Zack Ryder walks out. Could you imagine like Bruno Sammartino and they're WWF. It wouldn't have happened there, but let's imagine Harley Race against Ric Flair. There's an NWA match. Or Lou Thez against Pat O'Connor. There's an old school match. And all of a sudden, somebody's music hits and they just stop wrestling and let this person walk out to the ring and just watch this person walk out to the ring. To me, like that just takes me right out of the product because you're just not going to see that in UFC. I know wrestling's fake and all, but like something like that just kills my suspension of disbelief. Like, can you imagine a UFC fight? Let's say Daniel Cormier against John Jones, and in the middle of their fight, George St. Pierre's music hits, and they just stop fighting. Well, George St. Pierre walks out cage. I don't know. That stuff just pisses me off. You'll never see that. And there's some stuff that's happened in Great North Wrestling I don't agree with, but you'll never see that in Great North Wrestling. In MMA news, the PWF or PFL, Professional Fight League, is now majority owner of Bellator. They're going to run as two separate companies. However, there will be some combined shows where the champions of each league are going to wrestle or are going to fight each other. I mean, other than Ryan Bader, I couldn't name you one Bellator fighter. And I don't mean to be depressing during this podcast. I'm sorry. I should just stick to the news and not give my opinion. But to me, I mean, Bellator was, I don't think they even had a TV deal. I think their TV deal ended. So they're pretty much a dying company being bought here. PFL has Francis Ngannou, Jake Paul, pretty much, that people know of. And Francis Ngannou is getting paid like millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to fight in Saudi Arabia in boxing. So is he still going to do PFL when he's being offered so much money to have boxing matches in Saudi Arabia? Maybe he will. I don't know what his contract is. I heard that they're offering Jake Paul's opponent. It's one of the Diaz brothers. I forget which one of the Diaz brothers, but they're trying to offer like $15,000 to fight Jake, or $15 million to fight Jake Paul. And it's like, are the Diaz really worth $15 million at this point? They're pretty washed up. Their names, but even Dave Meltzer here, who like is a big MMA fan, says the reality is between the two brands, there are very few fighters that the general public cares about. And having more good fighters but fewer name fighters isn't going to really strengthen anything. I agree with that. Apparently, most of these Bellator shows are going to be done outside of the U.S. That might actually help them. Betrayed by Sin. Piper's doing great. Thank you. Titus. I don't even remember bringing up Titus, but Titus O'Neil. Don't know what's happened to him. Betrayed by Sin agrees with me. Otis wears his fat tights well. But guys, just watch NWA. And I hate to say this, but Brodus Clay was one of them. Tyrus. Maybe this guy meant to write Tyrus, but Brodus Clay had these short tights. But there's some guys that had bigger belly that currently are still in NWA that have bigger bellies than Brodus Clay, also wearing short tights, and like that's just not a look I want to see. I'm sorry. I want to see the women in short tights like that, but not these out of shape guys. Nate Diaz, Mop Shop, thank you. Jake Paul is offering the PFL, I should say, which Jake Paul owns part of, is offering $15 million to fight Nate Diaz, which seems like a hell of a lot. So if they're paying in the $15 million, maybe Francis Ngannou will fight. But Meltzer has said this before, and it's been well reported. Francis Ngannou has not been, although he's a great fighter, I don't doubt it. He's not really that much of a draw. I mean, I watched some of the highlights from Ngannou against Tyson Fury, but I had no real interest in watching the fight. I just wanted to know the results. Rick Bassman, who's more of a fight fan than me, I was talking to him the day of the fight, and he forgot that it was even happening. And another one of my friends that does MMA and usually watches all the UFC pay-per-views, I was talking to him the same day as that fight happened, Tyson against Ngannou, and he didn't even know that it was happening that day. So people just, like, it's not like Conor McGregor. When Conor McGregor's having a fight, everyone knows about it. And maybe it's just because Canada, but it seemed like when George St. Pierre was fighting, it was the talk of everywhere. They were talking about it in the gym all week and stuff. Now it seems like there's less interest in MMA than there was. John says, yeah, I've seen Tony Khan being made fun of. I do think that I actually think Tony Khan is a great guy. Great guy. I would love to work for him. I probably never will. But I would love, as a guy that's had to work 3 jobs at a lot of points in my life and work very hard for my money, I would love one of these jobs where you just get paid for sitting at home. Or Lance Archer sits at home for months and then just comes in and puts somebody over. I mean, please do that with me, because I understand the lowest. I don't know what Ring of Honor pays, but I understand the lowest AEW contract is $150,000. I've said this before, but the Brock Lesnar mini-me guy that AEW signed after WWE fired him, who I don't even remember his name. He had like a homosexual gimmick in NXT. He's being paid $180,000 a year. So they pay people so much. I would love, imagine if I was making that much, how many top of the line interviews I could do. And I'll be honest, my haters can say what they want. I'm a better wrestler. I'd be in the top 25% of AEW wrestlers, and if I was wrestling more regularly, definitely higher than that. And as far as realism, I mean, I'd be in the top 5% of AEW wrestlers. And as far as being a great heel, I would be in the top 5% of AEW wrestlers. Just for whatever reason, I never get those opportunities. I was definitely, by far, the greatest heel of the year 2021 and had the most YouTube hits of any independent wrestler of 2021, any male independent wrestler. Who knows? Anyways, the whole point why I was saying that is Tony seems like a really, really great guy. I understand why people make fun of him. But like I love how he takes care of guys like Jake the Snake too. Jake the Snake would still have to be at autograph shows on the independents, like begging for money. But he's had a cushy AEW job since it opened. So who knows? Probably one of the reasons why Jake hasn't relapsed is because his life has been so good with that AEW money. So I'm glad he helps so many wrestlers out. I like him. I don't agree with all of his booking moves, and we definitely have different tastes. We have some similar tastes, but some different tastes in wrestling. But I do like him, and I don't blame him for booking what he wants. If my dad was rich too, I would just book whatever I wanted to see. Anyways, guys, I'll stop rambling. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or